Hey guys, thanks for tuning us in for this 49th episode of Good Questions with Cameron Dole. Special guests for this episode include the host of the Bleav in the SECQB podcast, Taylor McHargue, also a 4-year starter for the University of Rice, and even led them to their first conference championship since 1953. We'll also visit with actor John Hannah. We'll talk about their new series, Transplant, which airs Tuesday nights on NBC. If you would, please take the time to subscribe, drop a like, comment, leave some feedback, and share with your friends. All right, so our first guest on the podcast today is going to be Taylor McHargue. He's the host of Bleav in the SECQB on the Bleav Podcast Network. He's also the first 4-year starting quarterback at Rice and led the first Rice Conference Championship since 1953. With all that in mind, Taylor McHargue, now you got something to really live up to, right?
Well, you know, it was a fun time, obviously, playing there, and they have Rice has struggled for the last few years, but this year it started off 1-1, not playing bad, and then unfortunately had their game canceled last week. But I think Coach Bloomgren is doing some nice things, and excited for them that they're actually getting a chance to play this year.
And what has it been like once the SEC decided to come back to whatever schedule it is that is remaining? What was it like coming to the field for the first game? How much different was the feeling?
Well, it's certainly different. I mean, the biggest thing is, and this is obvious whether you're in person or watching on TV, it's just the crowds aren't there. And that's what, when you talk about the highest level of football, I actually live in Austin. I'm based in Austin. And for, even UT games, it doesn't matter the conference. These schools that we're just used to 100,000 or 80,000 people in the stands, it's different. And I think that's why you're seeing some upsets this year with teams that are going on the road and winning in environments they normally wouldn't have, because crowds just really aren't a factor this year. But I think they're obviously doing the best they can. I think the SEC sort of led the charge with not reacting too soon. And I think you're seeing that was the recipe for success, because they're still getting a season in. You look around at what the Pac-12 and the Big Ten are doing, really trying to thread the needle with their COVID protocols. And now you're getting games that are canceled and postponed, and really just canceled because they don't have there's no bye weeks to throw games back in later in the year. So I think the SEC has done about as good a job as you could hope for.
And do you think, obviously you may have a little bias towards this, but do you think that the quarterback position is where the most of the pressure is going to be on, especially in this truncated season?
Well, I think the pressure, again, at the highest level, is always on head coaches and quarterbacks. And you look around, look at Jared Garantano in Tennessee getting pulled last week. I think, Stetson Bennett has a lot of pressure on him at Georgia. I think when you play at any of the blue chip programs in the country and you play the quarterback position, there's a ton of pressure. This year is unique in that they didn't have spring ball and they didn't have, summer workouts looked a little different, but you're seeing after you get 2 or 3 games in, a lot of these guys are falling into a rhythm. Some are not. I think Stetson Bennett's a good example of a guy that played well early in the season and has regressed as the year's gone on. But yeah, I think to your point, I think there's always pressure on the quarterbacks regardless of the year.
And who do you think has played the best with that pressure on them, specifically in the SEC, your neck of the woods, if you will?
Yeah, and I think it's a cliche answer right now, but Mac Jones has been phenomenal at Alabama, and he's exceeded expectations. I think for most people, I certainly didn't expect this out of him. I think most people thought there'd be a drop off from Tua. He's not a dynamic athlete like Tua is, but he's been accurate with the football. He's made great decisions throughout the year. And I've said this multiple times, but I think he is playing the position like a pro. I mean, he's on time, he's on schedule, and he's getting the ball where it needs to be, and he's not turning it over very frequently. And that's a recipe for success. I think, especially with Trevor Lawrence being out the last couple of weeks with COVID, I think that's why Mac Jones has sort of put himself in the driver's seat up there with Justin Fields in the Heisman race right now.
And what team, maybe SEC or maybe nationwide, do you see that the COVID and all of the different things that are going on right now, who do you think that it has affected what we expected from them the most?
I think in a negative way, I think COVID has had some sort of impact on the Longhorns at Texas. And I'm not sure exactly why, but they, for a team that, towards the end of last year, I thought in their bowl game, their win over Utah, I thought they sort of found some physicality. This year, they're missing that. And I wonder if COVID has something to do with that. Missing spring ball, camp looks a little bit different. And then around the SEC, I think Tennessee is, again, we felt like early in the year, maybe these guys are back. They closed the year out last year on a high note, but they're really struggling, and especially at the quarterback position. That's a lot of turnovers from Garantano. The hard part with COVID this year is you can use it as an excuse if you want, but all of these teams are dealing with the same thing. Everybody had to go through the same issues. And some are dealing with it better than others. And you got to be really mentally tough to control what you can control and take care of your business and show up every day and focus on that meeting and that practice, because you really don't know if that game that week is going to get played. It could get canceled. We've seen games canceled day of or the night before. So you really got to stay focused on just the one day at a time, one practice at a time. But all of these schools are facing these challenges right now.
That's right. Now, we talked about the host of the Bleav in the SECQB on the Bleav Podcast Network. And Taylor, tell us a little bit, how did you first get involved in the podcast world?
Well, I do college football analyst for a couple different platforms and call games for ESPN Plus and ESPN3, and then do radio kind of throughout the country, and was approached by Josh Booty's my co-host, played quarterback at LSU under Nick Saban, and we were just kicking around the idea. There's plenty of content around the SEC, but there's not a specific. We couldn't find really anything that had a specific focus on the quarterback position, which has the most eyeballs on it. I think that's where those are the 5-star guys that get the most, get the clicks and the eyeballs and the attention, and for good reason. And then you see at the beginning of every NFL draft, a lot of guys, your first round quarterback picks are the ones that garner the most attention. And so we felt like this would be a fun topic for us to just kick around. And we've had some really fun guests on already. I had Aaron Murray on last week with Georgia and got to visit with him about just his thoughts on Georgia and the quarterback position. And so it's one episode a week. Josh and I are both busy with other things, but we enjoy getting that, recording that, and just catching up a lot of times with guys around the country that you don't get to see that often anymore.
And I think one of the things I appreciate most about this season is that with everybody having to be so isolated and aware of that, you're not seeing quite as much of the drama maybe as you did in other seasons. What's your viewpoint on that one?
Well, I think you're not seeing as much of the drama. I also think just in terms of, it looks like to me and Clemson, let's assume Trevor Lawrence plays last week. I think they beat that Notre Dame team. To me, there's Ohio State, there's Alabama, and there's Clemson, and then there's everybody else. There's a pretty steep drop off. And I think that's been a problem for some of these conferences for a long time, is you want that drama. You want schools to rise up and challenge people. I mean, the entire Big 12 right now is really struggling. And I don't think there's, it'd be a miracle at this point for a Big 12 team to get into the playoff. And I don't think that's good for college football. I think college football is great when Oklahoma and Texas and Tennessee and Florida and USC and Oregon, those schools are good. You want the blue chip programs to be playing and humming at a high level. Look at Penn State right now. Look at Michigan. Those programs, Michigan looks really bad through the first part of the year. So I think when you talk about, you want that drama because that creates, it is just more fun. That creates entertainment in the sport of football.
And Taylor, of course, I want to make sure not only let folks know where they can find the podcast Wednesdays and also where they can keep up with everything else you got going social media wise.
Yeah, we air SECQB. It's on, we're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts. It's on all the platforms. So whichever way you consume your podcast, it's out there. And then Josh is on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at TMcHargue16. That's probably the medium that I'm most active on, and I try and engage with everybody. But yeah, the podcast, for anybody out there that gives it a listen, if you enjoy it, like and review it, and we have fun with it. If there's ever any questions, let Josh and I know, and we try to bring those up on the show. But again, we're enjoying doing it, and I think there's some good guests coming up that I think people will really enjoy.
All right. Well, Taylor, it has been nice to get to visit with you a first time. I'm sure we'll visit again, and hopefully have a great rest of your week. And again, thanks so much for your time, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
Up next is actor John Hannah. You know him from many movies, 4 Weddings and a Funeral. My personal favorite was the Mummy series that he played in. Also in the new series Transplant, which airs Tuesday nights on NBC. First off, John, thank you so much for taking the time.
No, pleasure. My pleasure, not a problem. My pleasure. Thanks very much. I just had a phone going off in the other room there. I was all panicked and flustered. I was like, close the door, get the phone. No, wait, I've got to answer them. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And John, we mentioned this came out September 1st here in the States, but had a good run and great feedback in Canada. And how excited are you for this now to be in the States?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. It's such a huge audience that we can reach there. And of course, if you do any kind of show, theatre, film, TV, and you believe in it and you think there's something great about it, then what you want is people to watch it. So from my point of view, probably getting a US transmission is the biggest news that we could have had. It's fantastic, and also to be so well received, because in some ways, the show's a little contentious. It's a refugee story. It's not necessarily something that a lot of people, one might think that a lot of people might not be too interested, might feel it's a little bit niche, but it seems to be confounding those expectations, so that's great.
And for you, playing the role of the head of the emergency department, Dr. Bishop, for you, John, how hard is it to keep up with all the terms, all the lingo, and how much study do you have to get preparing for the part?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't have as much as some of the operational kids, when they're actually doing procedures. But it's still difficult, I mean, it's like singing a song in a foreign language, and you have to sing it like you know what you're talking about. But thankfully the kids take the strain on that one, and they're doing great. I think Laurence Leboeuf, especially given that she's French Canadian and French is her first language. I think we're all very, very conscious of how much she has to do. She's always got like something very strange and unpronounceable to deal with. So we just give those to her. It's like having a special play in football. It's like, yeah, give it to Laurence.
You give her the script and then everybody sits and watches, right, as she reads?
Yeah, basically that's it. Yeah, I'm of an age where I remember like an old the Harlem Globetrotters, and there was one of the Harlem Globetrotters was Middlemarch Lemon, who everybody seemed to take a break while he went off on his plays.
That's right. And for you being involved, you talked about the great feedback and all that. How good is it for you to be able to get some good feedback, especially in the midst of all the darkness that we're seeing in the world these days?
Yeah, I mean, well, it would be very easy to sort of, put a funny spin on it and say, well, of course, I don't really read the reviews or anything. But even if you don't read reviews, you can't help be aware of what the dynamic is around a new show with social media. You switch your phone on, you'll get alerts about it. So it's very nice to have a positive reaction to, what I believe is a great show and a show worthy of a large audience. That's the great thing as well, is getting this show out to a large audience and having that audience respond positively. I couldn't be happier. I couldn't think of anything that would make me happier.
And John, for you this year, everybody's having to do things different, having to learn new things. What have you learned in 2020 that you're going to be able to carry forward into 2021 and further ahead?
I have 16-year-old twins who were at home. I've got a boy and a girl. And to be honest, I found it really, really difficult. So I started wild camping. You could not be more socially distanced. I would go out into Dartmoor, which is these big moors down in the southwest of the country, with my tent and a potato, and I would spend a couple of days. So I did start wild camping. I've done it a few times. I had an amazing experience on the beach, camping on the beach. There had been, as you know, with like all things is seasonal, and the mackerel chase whitebait, the shoals of whitebait that come at a particular time. And this night I was camping on the beach. The whole beach was covered with whitebait, which are tiny little fish about the size of your finger. You quite often get them in Italian restaurants, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the whole beach was covered in these. So in the world, I just built a little fire, put them on a rock and cooked them up. It was just the best. So I have my camping skills, my Jeremiah Johnson skills.
See, I was expecting you to throw back like a Zoom or something like that, but hey, wild camping, that may be the new trend as we go into the winter months, right?
It's great. You just the stars, the sky at night. This was over the summer, obviously. It was really spectacular. I couldn't have enjoyed that more.
And again, the new series Transplant on NBC, of course, check it out Tuesday nights. And John, always want to make sure and let folks know where they can keep up with everything you've got going on social media wise as well. Maybe keep up with those wild camping as well.
Yeah, it's NBC, 10 o'clock Eastern time. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, just putting up little pictures of me in my tent in the middle of the moors with some wild ponies. Wild ponies came up. They were very interested in my potato.
That's
the fish on the beach was the best. That was amazing.
That's good. That's quite possibly the best survival story of 2020 I've heard, John.
Yeah, that's me. Me and Aubrey.
Well, John, again, you're great to visit with you this morning. Looking forward to the new episodes, and hopefully we can catch up again real soon, my friend.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Season 2 will be with you before you know it.
Thanks again for joining us for this 49th episode of Good Questions with Cameron Dole. If you ever have a comment, question, or anything else you'd like to know, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at GQ with Cam. If you'd like to help out in the funding for this podcast, feel free to click the support tab and follow the instructions. Also, if you have a special guest idea, email me, gqwithcam@gmail.com. We'll be back with episode number 50 coming up tomorrow.